you see is going to terrify you. And everything you hear...
Who's the pretty girl?
He's watching us!
...is going to drive you...
Go!
...over the edge.
I'll leave it alone! Please! We'll do whatever you want!
Welcome back to the 11th annual Halloween special. Tonight we're talking about Joyride, a film that came out in 2001, directed by Dahl. He made this right after making Rounders with Matt Damon and Edward Norton. This film is part of an unofficial trilogy for me. It begins with 1971's Duel, directed by Steven Spielberg, then moves to 1997's Breakdown, directed by Jonathan Mostow, and ends with Joyride. All three of them involve an everyday person who gets thrown into an extraordinary situation around a desert landscape, murderous people driving trucks, and road rage. And while you might not assume that a movie like this would be included in the Halloween special because it is more of a thriller than it is a horror movie, I've always viewed Joyride as more horror adjacent. Because for me, Rusty Nail, the man behind the CB radio, voiced by Ted Levine, is a killer that could easily be in a slasher. We don't see his face, just like most slasher villains, and instead of using a knife or a machete, he uses his truck. The film is about three young people on a road trip from Colorado to New Jersey who talk to a trucker on their CB radio. They make the mistake of pranking him and must escape when he turns out to be a psychopathic killer. The film stars Steve Zahn and Paul Walker as brothers, and every time I watch this movie, and really any film with Paul Walker, I'm reminded how much I miss his presence in film. I love him in this movie. It's one of my favorite performances that he gave. Him and Steve Zahn work extremely well together and really do seem like brothers. Speaking of Steve Zahn, he's hilarious in this movie. I love seeing him in genre films, like A Perfect Getaway, for instance. And he's always great, but when he shows up in films like this, he really delivers. The film is also co-written by J.J. Abrams, a very early Bad Robot production. A production that was apparently littered with considerable reshoots and all different kinds of alternative endings and scenes. You wouldn't really know when you watch the movie because whatever they did seems to have affected the movie positively because it plays extremely well. It's a very tight movie, the runtime rarely ever drags, it's very fast-paced. From pretty much the opening scene, you are invested in these characters, and it's not much longer that they get the CB radio and this guy is following them. There is a break, however, in the middle of the film when they get to one of their destinations and we think that things have cooled down for a while. And normally, in a horror film or in a thriller, things ramp back up again pretty quickly. But Joyride actually takes its time for about 10 minutes to re-establish these characters in a new spot with new dynamics happening in their lives, as Paul Walker's character picks up a girl he's interested in, and his brother suddenly has eyes for her. This shifts the character dynamics for the rest of the movie, but it also feels like the movie is restarting. It's the only issue I have with an otherwise perfectly constructed thriller. Dahl directed the shit out of this movie. It looks so good. An early sequence in a motel where the brothers listen to a murder on the other side of the wall is shot, lit, and acted to perfection. And Ted Levine really is the perfect choice for the voice of Rusty Nail. To have Buffalo Bill on the other end of that line is pretty terrifying. What's most scary about him, though, is how powerful he seems to be. In some ways, you could fault the movie for that, because he seems to know where they're going to be. He always finds them. He can predict things and sometimes leaves messages on road signs for them to find, knowing that they would go in that direction, which takes a lot of forethought. But the thing is, the movie is so well constructed that you don't really think about it while watching it. You're so invested in the journey that you're not necessarily thinking about the fact that some of it doesn't really make sense. But if you were to really start to think about it, the movie just chooses not to show him following them. We don't get a wide shot of him a half mile away, tracking them slowly across the highway, which is probably what's happening. Would a shot like that help the story a little bit? Yeah. Would it be scary? Maybe. But maybe it would reveal too much. Maybe it's better to not know exactly where he is and just have that voice on the CB radio feel almost omnipresent. There's also a terrific set piece in the movie where they flee into a cornfield and the truck follows them in there. I obviously have a soft spot for cornfields in movies, But when it comes to this scene, there are some really gorgeous and haunting shots of that truck sitting there in the cornfield with its smokestacks shooting plumes of smoke across the sky. And as he trails the light across the corn stalks, you just know eventually he's going to find one of them. It's a really tense scene. And near the end of the film, an excellent Saw-level trap is set up with a shotgun that's aimed at our hero's potential girlfriend. And if they just open the door, she's going to get her head blown off. And it's also scary because we see this trap being set up while our heroes are outside running from motel to motel trying to find this girl, and you know that if they open the wrong doorknob, she's dead. Duel, Breakdown, and Joyride is an excellent unofficial trilogy to watch if you're ever in the mood for a movie like this. I would love to make a film like any of those movies. It is a major goal of mine for the future, and I hope to be able to do that someday. But as for Joyride, I've always loved this movie. I think Steve Zahn and Paul Walker are excellent in it. Leelee Sobieski is also very good, and I wish that John Dahl would direct more movies because he's really good at it. Guys, thank you so much for continuing to watch the 11th annual Halloween special. Look forward to more videos coming your way very soon, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.